Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar titled Learning the Fundamentals for Cage-Free Egg Success. This webinar is sponsored by both BASF and Big Dutchman and is presented by Watt Global Media. Hello, my name is Terrence O'Keefe. I'm the editor of Egg Industry Magazine and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. There will be a question and answer segment at the end of our presentations today. Please feel free to submit your questions during the presentations. Your submissions will remain anonymous to the rest of the audience and will only be visible to the moderator and speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we can with the time allowed. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view as an archive. If you would like to watch the archive of this webinar, please visit our website at wadagnet.com/webinars. We're in the process of scheduling more webinars for later this year. To register for upcoming webinars, view an archive of today's webinar, or see an on-demand webinar on a related topic. Once again, please visit our website at wadagnet.com/webinars. Courtesy of our speakers today, we have a handout of today's presentations available to download. Please note that the PDF is only available to download during our broadcast today. You can locate the handout in your GoToWebinar control panel. We will be asking members of today's audience to answer 2 poll questions during our presentation. Your participation is appreciated. Also, at the conclusion of today's webinar, there will be a brief survey. We would appreciate it if you took time to fill out this short survey. Our sponsors for today's webinar are BASF Corporation and Big Dutchman. BASF Corporation is headquartered in Florham Park, New Jersey, and is the North American affiliate of BASF SE in Germany. BASF creates chemistry for a sustainable future. They combine economic success with environmental protection and social responsibility. The approximately 114,000 employees in the BASF group work on contributing to the success of their customers in nearly all sectors in almost every country of the world. To learn more about products and services offered by BASF, please visit them at their website, basf.com/us/en. Big Dutchman provides a complete line of poultry and swine equipment around the world and leads the industry in the design and production of products geared towards your current and future needs. Big Dutchman stands for long-lasting quality, service, and unsurpassed know-how, and as the industry leader, their innovations will continue to positively impact the industries that they serve. To learn more about products and services offered by Big Dutchman, please visit them at their website, bigdutchmanusa.com. Now, we're really pleased to have 2 expert speakers today, Bill Snow and Dr. Jasper Herkins. Bill Snow is Big Dutchman's cage-free specialist. He's worked in agriculture since 1994 and has been with Big Dutchman since 2007. He works with egg producers and has spoken on the topic of cage-free management in North America, Latin America, and Europe. He's part of Big Dutchman's team working on teaching best management practices that result in improved production and hen welfare. He holds a degree in business management from Indiana Wesleyan University. Big Dutchman, based in Holland, Michigan, is a leading supplier of equipment used in poultry, pig, and egg farming. Bill?
What I want to talk to you about today is the importance of nothing. So what do I mean? I know some of you are asking, when you're planning your cage-free operation, you must understand the importance of aisle width and how it will affect your flock. I want to explain to you why nothing is so important. Aisle space is nothing, and it can often be overlooked in the planning stages. Next slide. So with each system that you're looking at, you want to find out how tall is that system, how wide is it, the location of the nest, how many hens will it accommodate, what type of bird you're going to be using, what type of ventilation do I need, where are my lights going to be hung in the aisle. All of these must be carefully thought out when deciding on what the aisle width should be. Remember, you're going to be also walking down these aisles, managing these flocks of birds. So the wider your aisle, I can step away from the system. I have a better opportunity to visually see into the system, see what the birds are doing. Next slide. Okay, you need quality space in the aisle for the birds to use the litter. You want to occupy time as much as possible for the flock. At any time, the birds should have the freedom to go and move where they want. This opens up space everywhere in the house. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, now let's look how aisle space affects the lighting in the row in the system. So go to the next slide. You need your lighting to be as uniform as possible. So in the aisle and also in the system. So what you're looking at here is a 4-foot aisle spacing and relatively about a 12-foot ceiling height. Today's systems are even, the system widths are sometimes 8-foot wide. Some are even 10-foot wide. Your aisle width affects the incidence of light. The wider the aisle, the more opportunity for that light to reach into the system on each tier. Can you go ahead and forward it one slide? One more. So as you can see, if I have a relatively tight aisle and I have a tall system, the lighting from each tier, it's going to be darker as the tiers further down. Go to the next slide, please. So if I can stretch that aisle, make that a little bit wider, go ahead and click the next and then the next. You have the opportunity for more light to reach into the system with the aisle light. Just a lot better opportunity for uniformity of light from tier to tier. And uniformity of light is what we want, because if you have areas of the system that are darker than others or brighter than others, you're creating a choice for the birds. And choice is good, but if you have too many birds seeking out one tier versus another, or one area of the system versus another, you're going to be creating congestion. And congestion just leads to problems with ventilation, mislaid eggs, litter quality we'll talk about a little bit later. Go to the next slide, please. So proper aisle width allows for more uniform temperature, optimum flock spacing, improved air quality and flow, better bird movement, and enhanced litter quality. So in talking about in ventilation, you can have the perfect ventilation set up for you, but if you don't have the aisle width, it just will not be as effective. Go to the next slide, and if you could just play that video for me. So proper aisle width for the flock, it opens up space in the aisle because the possibility for temperature uniformity is much greater. Birds are separated in the aisle. There is open space for air to mix in the litter. Temperature uniformity is crucial because that gets you bird separation. So you're ventilating the house for the birds, and you're also ventilating that house because you're trying to dry that litter out. You want birds engaged in the litter. If hens are lingering in the system, or if they're unable to jump down into the aisle easily, you're going to have less movement of your flock. So aisle space just creates that space that the birds need for dust bathing, foraging, and things like that. The floor space that's in between the system rows is always going to be a little bit more congested than underneath the system row itself. So the proper aisle width lessens this congestion, and this helps in drying the litter. Can we go to the next slide? Litter quality. Proper aisle width allows for use of litter for natural behavior. Dust bathing, foraging, scratching. You'll have less crowding. You'll have better spacing, which all will equal a drier litter. Go to the next slide. So litter and ventilation kind of work hand in hand. We need ventilation for the birds and also the litter. The more hens are packed into the aisle, the harder it is to impact the quality of the litter with the ventilation. The better you can get your litter quality, the more the hens will use it for foraging, scratching, dust bathing, which will actually also aid in that drying of the litter. Those birds are working through that litter and just making it more able. The litter is moving around. It's more and more contact with the ventilation that's running through the house, and it'll aid in that drying. So I always say, fight for nothing. You want aisle space. Go to the next slide. So if you notice, this is and if you play the video, you'll notice this is the litter from the house you're just looking at with the white birds. It's slightly it's a little bit on the wetter side. It's still okay quality. What can I do if my litter is a bit wet? Well, you may need to add stir fans, just spending more time in the house, walking the aisle, moving birds around in the house. That'll also help in getting those birds to move, separate, and helping actually in drying the litter as well. So go to the next slide. So when you have proper aisle spacing, when you have the proper aisle spacing for the system you have, the ventilation is going to have more opportunity to work through that litter. You're going to have good separation of the birds. You're going to have more even temperature through the length of the house. You're going to have less migration of birds moving from the front or the back of the aisle or of a partitioned area. It'll just aid in the dryness that you're able to get out of your litter, which will aid in those birds using that litter for aiding in the drying. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here you're going to see this is litter, very dry litter. Birds will really use this, and you want the birds to use the litter. You want them foraging, scratching, dust bathing. This just means you're occupying time. You're giving that bird something to do so they don't get bored in the system. So go to the next slide. Guys and gals, flock movement is what we're after. If you have proper aisle width for your system, everything opens up for the hens. Now you have quality space in the system and in the aisle. The birds can easily go to the nest. They can go to the perch, the feed, the water. They can get onto the litter floor easily. They can jump out of the litter area back into the system. It's just continuous flock movement, and that's what we're after. There's birds aren't idle. You go to the next slide. This just shows video of flock movement. Ultimately, flock movement is everything. If you have space for birds to get and go freely where you want at any time, they're going to be moving more. You're going to have less competition. Like I said earlier, you want to occupy time. There's less chance for those birds getting bored, which you'll have less mislaid eggs, and you'll have less opportunity for aggression. You go to the next slide. Hen welfare, this is what we're after. Proper aisle width directly improves the welfare of your hen. And if you go to the next slide. Aisle width improves your lighting, it improves your ventilation, it improves your flock movement, it improves the litter quality. The importance of nothing is aisle space. So if you have enough of nothing, you have movement. You're giving the bird the best opportunity for the best hen welfare. You're able to walk the aisles with not pushing those birds to a partition and crowding and getting stressed. It's easier for the birds. It's easier for the workers. Easier for the workers in that they'll spend more time in the barn because they can get to the different things. They can better see what's going on in the house. And it all leads to hen welfare. So having enough of nothing can make a big difference at your farm. Go to the next slide. So guys and gals, I say it, fight for nothing. And thank you. And I apologize, I couldn't move my slides like I wanted to. But thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Before we present our second speaker, we'd like to push out our 2 poll questions to you. Our first poll question for today is, do you think it is important to raise pullets in a cage-free rearing system? That's, of course, if you're going to, have them be cage-free layers. So we'll give you a moment to answer that question. Once again, do you think it's important to raise pullets in a cage-free rearing system if they're going to be in a cage-free layer house? Okay, just another moment. We'll move on to our next poll question. Which of these pests will be the most challenging to control as a result of a transition from housing hens in cages to cage-free systems? The choices are rodents, flies, mites, darkling beetles, or all of the above. Once again, which of these pests will be the most challenging to control as a result of a transition from cage housing of hens to cage-free? We'll give you just a few more seconds to answer the question. Which of these pests will be the most challenging to control as a result of a transition from housing hens in cages to housing them cage-free? Okay, we're pleased to have our second speaker with us today, Dr. Jasper Herkens. Jasper joined Janssen in 2016 and works as a poultry specialist. His responsibilities include poultry management, training, and research and marketing. He studied animal science with a specialization in animal health and behavior at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. His doctoral research project focused on raising laying hen on raising laying hen welfare in aviaries to a higher level. Jasper?
Okay, thank you, Terence, for your introduction. And I also like to start with thanking WaterNet for the invitation to present during this webinar. And as the title of the webinar is Learning the Fundamentals for Cage-Free Egg Success, the key to the success is multifactorial. And could you go to the next slide, please? Yes, so there are, as I said, the key to success is not just one key, it's a multifactorial issue and a combined action between genetics, feed and water, the environment and your housing equipment and your management. This is the case in, I think, any livestock keeping, and definitely also the case in cage-free housing of commercial laying hens. Because if you look at genetics, and the animals have been selected for decades on optimal performance on the specific conditions. And nowadays are even hybrids that are more suitable for cage-free housing compared to cage housing. Same goes for feed and water. Those birds also need proper feed and good water to be able to lay as many eggs as possible. But you can have a very good hen with good feed, but if you put it in the wrong environment, in the wrong housing equipment, she still won't be able to reach her full potential. And that altogether also comes with the good management of your birds in the house. And especially on those last two topics we would like to zoom into today. So, next, please. Next. And from my and from my background, I tend to often look from the animal natural behavior point of view, especially in a system like the cage-free system that really is applicable, because in this type of system the hen has opportunity to show almost a full repertoire of our natural behaviors, and this daily routine is quite strict and will come back just about every day at the same hour per day. So at night she roosts up high, and then as soon as she wakes up she will start feeding and drinking, and after she found the water she will start to lay her egg. And then if you would go into your house during midday, during noon, you will see most of the birds dust bathing, and then after that they will feed again. And also in between all the other behaviors, the hens forage a lot. So that's about 40% of the whole daily expenditure consists of foraging, and even more foraging. And then, well, if mates would have been present, then in the late afternoon they would start mating, and after that they would go up high in the system again to sleep. Next, please. And then if you look at the cage-free system, most producers that have shifted from the conventional cages to cage-free systems have shifted to the aviary system. So that's where I would like to put my focus on today. In this system, the birds are freely moving around using the aisle, as Bill just explained. And they have a lot more interaction with its environment, because they have to go up into the system to find feed, to find the water, to find the nests, to roost on the perches, or to rest on the perches, or to escape to more quiet places. And this asks for some more skilled birds than we used to. Next slide, please. And as I explained, every bird, of as I explained, every bird, of course, has its necessities. So every bird needs feed and water in her daily routine. She wants to lay her eggs. She needs a place to lay her eggs during daytime, but especially during the night. She needs a nice, quiet place to rest. And of course, she needs light to find all those spots, and fresh air is, of course, needed as well. Next, please. And those necessities, they are well, provided by the facilities that are present in the house. Next, please. So for the feed, that will be the feed chains or the feed pens or feed towers. Water is provided through the drinking lines. The laying nest is where she will lay her eggs. And then the place to rest is on the perches, and then the lights and the ventilation, of course. Next, please. This actually leads to different functional areas in the house. So feed can be found on the same places. Next, please. Also the drinking lines, which we generally advise to place in front of your nests. Next, please. So that brings us to the nests. There's also a very specific functional area in your house. Then the perches, as they have the desire to roost up high, it's best to have most of your perches as high as possible in your system. Then Bill already spoke about the lights. You need a good light distribution in your house, and also proper ventilation to give the birds enough fresh air, but also to maintain good litter quality. Next, please. But all these functional areas and these type of housing systems, they lead to a more complex housing for the bird, and that therefore demands that the bird is able to navigate through those systems and has the skills to navigate and move through those systems. And that has to be taught already during the rearing period. So as actually was already asked in the poll, here you have your answer. Cage rearing is definitely unsuitable for cage-free systems during the production, because the birds need to learn to go up high, to look for water, to look for feed as soon as possible, not only to learn that they have to go up high, but also to get the bodily physique, to get the strength to do that, and also to have the navigation skills, knowing how to jump and where to jump, to make the correct judgments. This will lead to fewer fractures, fewer of mainly the keel bone, but also other bones may fracture if they are not capable of correctly navigating through the system. Next, please. So if you already teach your pullets during the rearing phase where to find the feed, the water, and the nests, or at least to go up high, they will do so as well in your production system. This is also where you start to teach the birds the desirable habits like scratching behavior, the foraging behavior, to go up high in the system during nighttime. So already then you can start dimming the lights in the evening, so they will go up. Otherwise, if they are learning to roost on the floor, they will do so as well in the production phase, and then that's a major risk for getting more floor eggs. If you already teach to jump and fly, walk more, you will strengthen their bodily condition, as I said as well, also the navigation skills, and this all will lead to a better transition between your rearing house and your production house. Next, please. And to even further have a smooth transition between your rearing and your production house or your aviary house, you need to adopt the same feeding and light schedule that was in the last week of the rearing, and preferably use the same type of drinkers, the same type of feeders, the same type of purchase, so they don't have to get used to that again when they go to a new system. And then you can start to prepare the hen by light stimulation to start laying. As I said, as it was written down in the previous slide, rearing in a cage-free system takes a bit longer than in caged housing, so we generally would suggest to keep your hens up to 16 or 17 weeks before transitioning the birds to the production system. This just gives you that little bit of extra time to get a more strong bird, a little bit more robust laying hen before she has to start performing in your aviary system. It's very important when you place the young laying hens in your aviary system to look, think, and act upon what's happening in your house. So, are they finding the water? Are they actually drinking it as well? Are they finding the feed in the troughs? Have a close look at their behavior. How is the movement? How are the sounds? Make sure the birds are doing well as soon as they've been placed in their new system. And the first few nights you manually do the dimming of the lights to see if all the birds go up in the system, and if they don't go in the system, or not all of them, then you have to do that by hand, and well, that's not the nicest job to do, I guess. And next slide, please. But as soon as the birds have been in the house for a while, you have to go in and look. I was just talking about training your birds, but you yourself and your staff should be very well trained as well, meaning know your chicken behavior, know how they act at the different times of the day. So as soon as they wake up, what does a chicken do? How is the nesting behavior? How's the nest seeking behavior? How's the laying behavior? How is the dust bathing? How should they go up at night again? If you know all those behaviors, you will also be able to see if there are any abnormalities as soon as something goes wrong. So you have to be able to recognize those signals. And for that, you have to train all your senses. So, well, the most easy and the most important sense is, of course, your sight. So see what's going on at the different times of the day. And then look at the normal behaviors, but especially also recognize the abnormal behaviors like feather pecking or cloaca pecking and cannibalism. Or when you see the birds laying their floor eggs, or are they more in a bigger picture? Are they anxious? Are they very calm? Are they stressed? Or are they smothering? How's the distribution over the house? So for that, you have to just stand or sit still in your house and observe the overall picture, and then not just a minute, but do that every other day for 5, 10, 15 minutes, so that the birds will get used to you and start acting as they would if you were not in the house. This way you will be able to see if something is wrong, but you also have to use your other senses, so hear what's going on. Which sounds do they make? Do they make their typical sounds when they go up at night? Is it too noisy, or is it too quiet in the house? Also use your smell. Do you smell too much ammonia, or do you notice there's a lot of fine dust in the house? And well, you can even use your taste if you want. If you don't like to drink the water they are drinking, well, then they probably also don't like to drink that same water. So yes, not only train your birds well, but train yourself or your personnel very well to be able to recognize if there are any abnormalities in your house. Next, please. Bill already went into the topic of litter, and I would like to go into that as well. Wet or excessive litter in your house is a risk for health problems for both your personnel as well as your animals. So it's good to don't have too much wet litter, or no wet litter, or not too much litter in your house. As well, excessive litter is also a risk for floor eggs, and proper litter, dry friable litter, stimulates scratching and foraging behavior. And stimulating scratching and foraging behavior is actually the most effective way to prevent feather pecking and cannibalism. So it's just highlights the importance of having a good litter quality. And as mentioned before as well, the practicality. If you have to walk through your house through too high litter, too wet litter with too much ammonia in the air, it's just not nice to work in such a condition. Next, please. So maintain a dry, friable litter at a low level. We generally suggest 5 centimeters, which is 2 inches. You can obtain this by proper ventilation, also a balanced diet. Make sure your system has no leakages of the drinking lines, but also condensation can be a cause of wet litter. Next, please. And as I said in one of my first slides, hens spend 40% of their daytime activity on foraging. Use this to your advantage. As Bill said, make sure the hens move around a lot. They will scratch your litter to a nice, dry, friable matter. Next, please. And you can encourage this scratching behavior by also adding substrates to your litter, or scatter feed around, which activates the hens even more to scratch in the litter. And also timely removal of your litter. And there are some automated systems for that nowadays. Just some shovels that go through your house, remove some litter. As soon as they made a way for, they got rid of the litter, hens will start scratching and it gets loose again. Plus another beneficial attribute of such a system is that it may also prevent some floor eggs. Next, please. And vision is the most important sense for ground living birds, looking from a natural point of view. Next, please. So a good light really improves the performance, behavior, and the welfare of the birds. You can regulate its biorhythm, so when do the hens wake up, when do they go to bed, but you also alter physiological processes. So you use light for the sexual maturation, and you can use it for feed intake and laying behavior. And as I said earlier, the aviary system has a lot of functional areas. Next, please. And although you need good uniform light conditions, you might also consider having different light intensities at different sections of the house, especially in the scratching areas. And under your system, you want a high light intensity, as well as in your system and around your feeders, you want a high light intensity, uniform high light intensity. This to prevent hens laying the eggs at those places. Around the drinkers, it may be a bit lower in front of the nest entrance. A bird likes not too bright nest entrance, so make sure the light is a little bit lower there. And in the nest, it has to be dark, but not totally dark, not pitch black dark. So make sure there's still like half a lux of light in your nest. Next, please. And then nowadays are quite some new developments, some innovations in light, coming with different colors of lights. This allows you to give some more directions to your hands, but it's very important to have your lights dimmable. So this allows you to have a high light intensity at the placement of the hands, just to make sure that they will find the feed, that they will find the water. And then also during the production time, you have your light at a higher intensity. And as soon as they have laid their eggs, you might lower the intensity in the afternoon. This could be a measure to reduce feather pecking if that will be present in your house. Make sure you use the right light source as well. If you have to use high frequency light sources, because there are also lights with a low frequency. We as humans see it as just one light beam, but a chicken can sense light at a higher frequency, so she will look at a flickering light all day. So it will be the same as you standing in the disco all night. So make sure you use high frequency light sources or LEDs. Warm white light would be advisable. And then in the morning, you can just quickly turn on all the lights, but in the evening, you can use dimming the lights in a sequential order to lure the birds up to the highest perches to make sure they roost in the system at night. Next, please. So that was it for me today. So just to take home message is that you need proper training of both your bird as yourself. Observe and detect if if everything's correct or something's wrong. Make sure you've dry friable litter and make sure you have good light. Oh yeah, what I wanted to add to that is place yourself in the shoes of the bird every now and then. So if you kneel down in the litter and you look up into the system and you are blinded by the light and you can't even see the perches, the approach perches, or you can't even see the nests or the drinkers, then imagine that the bird is blinded as well. So also try to place yourself into the bird's optical view. This really helps you on what is the bird experiencing and how to adjust to that. So that was it for me today. I would like to thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Jasper. Now we're going to go to our Q&A segment, and also like to remind everybody that if they do want the handout for today's presentation to download it, you need to do it before we end the webinar today, so you can do that now. You go to your webinar control panel and you'll see where you can download it. We do have an awful lot of questions already submitted. If you have another question, go ahead and send it in. We'll try and get to it. A whole bunch of the questions center on, okay, how much space between the aisles is enough? We'll start with one question that was asked. Is it safe to say that 15% of the space that the hen is afforded is too little to have in the aisleways?
Do you want me to answer that, Jasper?
Yeah, either one, yeah.
Yeah.
15 or 50?
15, 1-5.
1-5,
yeah. 15% is not a lot. And again, the birds usually are using that aisle space in the middle of the aisle, in the middle of a system row, if it's an aviary, because that's where they're jumping down into the aisle. That's where they're jumping out of the aisle. They can see more things in the aisle. So you usually will have more birds gathering in the aisleway versus underneath. Now there will be birds underneath the system. 15% is most I would say every system out there has 15%, because right now that is that's what you have to have. Overseas, I know that they require more space than 15%, but it also depends on how much are you in there, how much are you interacting with the birds. Do you have a worker that is walking those aisles all the time, helping in not driving the birds, but moving the birds around in the house? Those birds will get used to you walking down those aisles. But so if you don't have a lot of space and birds are idle, if you walk into a house and you're sitting in the front, it'll take a while for those birds to calm down. As you're in there, they'll be looking to see what you're doing. But if you go in there and sit and you see birds that are just idle in the system, you probably have an issue, because it could be that it could be a ventilation issue, it could be a lighting issue, it could be that space. You'll be able to tell what you have going on, and you may need to have more people walking and working those birds because of that. So I'm not one to tell you that 15% is just not enough. You just may have to manage that house better than if you have more space.
Now, I guess we've had questions that focus on, is there a difference between aisleway space in between the aisles of the aviary, let's say, and the space that's provided underneath the aviary?
It's all space. I mean, it's all quality space. You just have more birds using that aisle in the center. There's still going to be birds underneath using that aisle, and that's where you may need the light to be a little bit brighter underneath, and sometimes you may want that light to be the exact same uniformity as the light in the aisle or the light in the system. Because if, say, you have an aggressive flock and you're trying to lessen the aggression of the flock, trying to keep that flock calmer, you may want to dim that light underneath. But it's always, well, if I dim my lighting, then I'm going to create more mislaid eggs. And that's not always the case. If it's very bright underneath, you could have birds crowding underneath the system, and they'll cause more mislaids because of that, because it's bright. So you want the bird to be able to use all of the space in the house, and there's just more birds that you need more, I would say, separation of birds in the aisle, because that's what enhances movement of the birds from jumping into the aisle and being able to jump out of the aisle.
Okay. I have a number of questions about any tips that either of you might have for preventing floor eggs.
Well, preventing floor eggs is, of course, it's a multifactorial thing. You have to make sure the hens are comfortable with going up, and that they have, that they are attracted to the nest. So make sure you have a attractive nest. Don't open the nests before the first eggs are found. Preventing floor eggs by collecting from the start every floor egg you find. This means that the first few weeks when they start to lay their eggs, that's when you will find the most floor eggs. Make sure you walk like several rounds, at least once an hour, maybe even more often, to collect every floor egg you see, because once a hen will see a floor egg, she will sit next to it and lay the next egg in the clutch, because that's just what they tend to do from nature. And then as well as, of course, the light. So I think that those are already a few tips to prevent floor eggs.
And I would just add to that, Jasper, that everything as Jasper said earlier, everything starts in the pullet facility. The better you raise your pullet, moving up and down and keeping that bird moving up and down and controlling aggression, because it'll start in the pullet facility. That will all help you in lessening the opportunity for floor eggs once those birds start going into production.
Okay, thanks. Jasper, we have a question for you. How simplistic can your rearing system be and still allow the pullets and hens to navigate the production system when they're in the laying house?
Preferably, which still can be sort of simplistic, you have slats. You've got platforms that you are able to lift up as soon as the birds, the pullets get older and older, and on those platforms is where you provide your feed and especially your water and perches. As long as you are able to provide perches, feed and water over the floor, and not just only like a few centimeters, but make sure they at the end they have to go up to just about the same height as they will have to in the aviary, yeah, you're in the right direction.
Another question on floor space in general. Is there a rule of thumb for the combination of the space underneath the system on the floor and the aisleways? Like, what percentage should that be of the total space that the hen is provided?
Well, overseas here in Europe, it's about 1/3 of the usable living space, I believe, is needs to be littered floor, so that can be underneath your system as well as an aisle width in between the systems or next to the system. And most of that is based on research that's done on and the amount of litter area a bird should require in such a system.
Yeah, I would just add to that when we're talking about floor space, that's where litter can collect. Birds need litter. I preach that to all of the people that I work with. They need litter because that occupies time, and when birds are in large groups together, you want to occupy time of the bird, and having the proper amount of litter space for the bird will help you in the end. I know it costs more up front to provide that litter space, aisle space, and the width of your barn is wider because of it. Your rows are further apart because of it. But all of that will, in the long run, it should be worth it to provide that.
So in saying that, Bill, we have a number of questions that kind of play off of that. Does that mean that there are fewer birds in the house?
Not necessarily. You're still at either 1 square foot per bird or 1.2 square foot per bird, or sometimes 1.5 square foot per bird, just depending on what it is. You need to look at the width of the system, how tall the system is. All that will play in how many birds per running foot, if you will, have access to the litter in that area. So it doesn't mean that I just have far less birds in this house, and that's why they have more litter space. You certainly need to look at the height of the system and the width, and also where the nest is, and how the incidence of light gets to each level of the system. Because if all of that is right, then it'll actually create better spacing on the floor, because you're creating less congestion, less opportunity for birds to get aggressive, and it opens up space so you have better uniformity of temperature, which opens up space, keeps birds separated. So all of those things kind of work together in providing an environment that really goes right to the welfare of the hen.
So then what we're kind of saying is that to really have the optimum house for the birds, we really have to design the dimensions of the house around the system that we want to use.
Yeah, and not just you're not just selecting a system. I mean, that definitely is part of it. But you need to select a certain system, and then say, okay, how dense is this system? How much space does the system create, and how wide then do I need to make my aisleways to create floor space for the flock?
And even if you have that all set out perfectly, if you put in a bird which is not reared properly, she will still fail to perform well in such a system.
Yep.
Now, Yasser, I have a couple questions where you mentioned that birds can be housed at a density of up to 18 birds per square meter in a properly designed aviary house. And
Correct.
some question on, is that really possible, because people are worried that the density is too high?
Well, that's per square meter floor space. So that eventually, if you adds up, if you put in the right system, you will have, I think it's 2.5 foot square, 2.5 square foot per bird usable surface. So
Okay,
it's
so the 18 square meters is just floor space, not total space. It doesn't include the aviary space.
no. So it's 18 birds on the floor, but because you got the multi-tier system above the floor, you got some more livable of usable surface. So that adds up to the 18 birds per square meter floor space.
Okay.
But because you got more livable of usable surface above the floor space, which they are able to use.
Okay. People are still asking questions about aisleway widths, and because it's a hot topic, and I guess the one question's come in that just flat out asks, is 3 feet too narrow for an aisleway?
Yeah, and I've been in houses where it's like that, and you know, 3 feet is what it's always been in cages. You know, so the closer I can make my rows of equipment, the more rows of equipment when I can get in there, the more birds that I can get into the house, the cost per bird is cheaper. On paper, sometimes things look good. And then once you go into the operation, when the birds are in the house, it is not as good. And let me go back, Terrence. There are some people who want that rows of equipment to be close together, because then the idea is that that bird doesn't have to jump back and forth very far. But again, if you're raising a bird that knows how to jump and navigate up and down, you want that bird to navigate up and down within the system row, not jumping across. Doesn't matter how far, how much width you have, the bird, you'll have some birds that will still jump across, but you'll have the majority of the birds, and what you want is the majority of the birds moving up and down within each system row, so they're not jumping across. But when you have a 3-foot aisle, you're going to have congestion, and with a lot of the aviary systems that are out there, I would say that, you know, that would be less than what I would want to see. I always say fight for space, fight for aisle space, because if the more aisle space you have, I can tell you that the better, for just one thing, the better the quality of the litter will be, which will mean that you're going to have people. It's hard to find good people to work in cage-free systems, not because there's not good people out there. It's, you just need more people, and it's not a sometimes the funnest job to have, but the easier you can make the management, the more people will want to be in there. They'll be interacting with the birds. They're going to spend more time in there. And if you have a tight aisle, you can imagine that it makes things very crowded. It makes things very difficult on the management side, not just from the birds, but from the management side. I guess the simple answer is I would like to see more than that. Doesn't matter what type of system you have. Let me put it this way, if you have 3 feet now, you're going to wish that you had more.
Okay. Do have a question for you, Jesper, specifically about behavior. They're asking in a large aviary house, can birds really establish pecking orders with, hundreds or even 1,000 birds in one pen, so to speak? And how does this compare to their ability to form a peck order in a cage?
To some degrees, it's known that birds, the same birds tend to stay in the same area in the house. So you keep actually the same groups in the same parts of the house. So there is some degree of pecking order possible. Of course, not as clear or as good as you would have in the cage environments or under natural conditions. So it's not as good or as strict as in those systems, but there is some degree of pecking order. Yeah, and there's, how you say, there's not much you can do or change about it. And some degree of pecking order is, of course, is not undesired. I mean, same as aggression in the flock. You've got aggression and aggression. Just a little bit of fighting is good, but as long as it's not excessive fighting or goes over into feather pecking. So yes, there is some pecking order, but not the same as you were used to, maybe.
Okay. Now I've got a few questions about litter I'm going to try and combine. They've asked, is there an optimum depth for the litter, and does litter depth sometimes influence the number of floor eggs?
That the more litter, the higher the risk for floor eggs, and it gives the hen just more opportunity to build a nest and to find more comfort in that. So everything above 2-3 inches of litter is too much, I think. If you also keep it to only 2 inches of litter, you will also have a very strong reduction of your fine dust going out of your house. So it's also good for the environment as well. So yeah, we would say 2 inches is just about an optimum, I guess. I don't know how Bill is in that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You definitely need some litter depth to aid in the drying of the fresh litter that is being dropped into the owl. But too much litter, it can lead to mislays. It can lead to other issues that you don't want. I know there's a lot of tests being done with one of the things we fight is well, if the litter is too dry, then I've got dust, and then if the litter is too wet, I have ammonia. Where is that fine line? I know animal scientists right now are doing a lot of study on that, yeah, I mean, you've got to really take care of the litter. So if my litter is too high, and I have good management, I have people in there, they're picking up eggs, I'm not as concerned to that. But if you're not in there, it can get away from you.
Okay, we do have some questions on light. One was, are there any advantages to natural light in a aviary house?
I be careful how I say this. Natural light is just extremely difficult to control because, and I know natural light, it sounds good, but for the birds in a commercial setting, it can be very hard because it can be too much light, and if you have too much light, you can't control aggression, and it can be a problem. It can be a problem for the welfare of the bird. It can stress them out because you have higher aggression, so you don't get that bird movement anymore. They don't feel like they can get to the feeder when they want to. They're waiting until aggressor, more dominant birds are moved out of the area. They can't get to the nest because of that. It causes a lot of stress. So I personally, I don't like natural light, but it's one of those things that we have to work with.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. Of course, you do have some advantage of natural light with your vitamin D production, etc. But nowadays, I think the feed meals are very well capable of providing well-balanced diets to cover that up.
Well, thank you very much. Do appreciate everyone's attention today, and I'd like to thank the attendees today for taking time to listen to today's webinar. A recorded archive will be made available on our website at wattagnet.com/webinars. Today's webinar will be available to view within the next few days. To register for upcoming webinars, view today's webinar, or see another on-demand webinar on a related topic, once again, please visit our website. We'd like to thank our sponsors, BASF and Big Dutchman. To learn more about the products and services offered by BASF, please visit them at their website, basf.com/US/EN. To learn more about products and services offered by Big Dutchman, please visit them at bigdutchmanusa.com. I'd like to ask each of you to take just a couple minutes to answer our short survey, which will be sent to you at the end of our webinar. Finally, I'd like to extend thanks to both of our speakers today. We appreciate their time. And thanks again to all of you for joining us, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.